I'll tell you, well, not live, but all right, we're recording. Islam, peace, 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 peace. I would like to say love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, family. Again, we back with another episode of the Journey to a Knowledge of Self podcast. We like to call it the JKS podcast. And today, I'm here with none other than the Noble LaMark Barclay Bay, another member of the illustrious BBT Science Temple and School. Greetings, Noble. How are you today?
I'm good, man. Greetings. Today's a lovely day, man. My daughter started first grade today, man. So I think like any proud parent, today is filled with a lot of joy, in my heart and spirit, man. So it's beautiful seeing, your loved ones, your little ones, shall I say, grow up, man. My baby girl is, she's amazing. So I'm excited, man. I'm definitely excited, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Well, I say alhamdulillah. We thank God for your young empress matriculating through, as we say, life, as she's beginning her journey, and just a high honor. And she's very, very fortunate, blessed to have you as a noble, as a father. I would say great demonstration, Noble. So Islam to that. Islam to, but I'm doing well by Allah's grace. And I can't complain, I'm just trying to get 1% better every day,
Absolutely.
So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing, man. Each day, another journey. But as you mentioned, your daughter starting first grade is kind of apropos that we're talking now about our journey and how we gain the knowledge of self. And it really starts from childhood, right? In any other way that we're exposed. And what I like to also add, like as a preface here, is that the reason why the title of the podcast is Journey to a Knowledge of Self and not Journey to the Knowledge of Self, because everyone have their own separate path that they travel, right? Some have more experiences than others, but those experiences ultimately lead you to where you are today. So beginning with your childhood, Noble, tell me about how was your upbringing and your home, and maybe some of what your neighborhood was like, and maybe your first introduction as you get to religion as a child. How did that come about for you?
Well, I appreciate it, man. I think like a lot of people, I grew up in a loving two-parent home. Saw both of my parents together. We were definitely a church-going family. Every Sunday in a Baptist church environment is where I grew up in. And it was funny, for my parents. I don't know if it was my dad or my mom or whatever. It was more, it was like, hey, if we can't just go to church, if you're gonna go to church, you gotta be active. So, my dad was like, well, you either gotta sing, which our mom sang in the choir. So they was like, well, you gotta either sing or you gotta be on the usher board, because my dad was, on the usher board.
Right.
So, he was like, we ain't just gonna go. You gotta do, one of those two. So early on, I sang.
Wait, you were singing?
Man, I did.
You was like Lionel? Was you like Lionel, or you was like
you know what? I was I was Spirit. I mean, I was, Little Precious Jewels was the name of our youth choir.
Precious Jewels.
The Precious Jewels is what we were part of. So, I sang early on, and then but I really wasn't blessed with that gift in the same way that my mom and my sister are blessed with that gift. So at some point in time, I was like, I don't really want to do this singing thing. Can I, can we just let me do the choir? I mean, let me do the usher board thing. So I made my way over to the usher board, and so I'm, every Sunday, we are soldiers in the army. I mean, that was me every single Sunday. And so Yeah, obviously it was a strong background. We was Sunday school, um, every single Sunday. That was just a big part of who I was. My parents went to Bible study, and everybody I knew was associated some way through the church. Uh, and so, we grew up in, I'm out here in where I was in South. I live in California, in Sacramento specifically. We grew up in the South End of Sacramento. I didn't know we lived in quasi the hood, like I thought, I thought we lived a good life because we went to church at was at the time, a pretty decent neighborhood. My parents were, active, taking us, whitewater rafting and camping, and we just did a lot of stuff. So for me, I thought we lived, I guess, really a kind of a middle class lifestyle. And I guess really we did. It wasn't until I got older, and started looking back, and I realized, like, wait, we lived kind of in the hood. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really, really, because that wasn't the kind of life, so to speak, that my parents, lived for us. They really pushed education. They really pushed us to scholastically, do everything we had to do. They were big on if my parents called you out on something that you said, a word or something you said, and you couldn't find it for them right then and there. Well, in that moment, right then and there, first of all, you had to go find out what it is, but you could not use that word again in the house until you could properly define it on ask, right when it happens, or right when they say something about it. And so education was a really, really big part of my upbringing in that regard.
It's long, Noble. So, like, would you say when you were having, being courted, as you will, or like being kind of like trained in a way, when you were going to services, when you were singing with the choir, you will, like, do you recall the type of, the feeling that you had at that time, like, the inspiration that it may have given you, or the how would you say, how did you reflect on your time singing with the choir? And I just wanted to take this moment just to ask that, because as a child, we're doing things out of more or less if we're being told to do it, but there's a certain purity in it that I think, as an adult, we kind of lose. So as you were with the choir as a child, what was that experience like, for you?
I thought it was live. I mean,
Right. Right.
Obviously I was doing it because I didn't have a choice. Like I said, my parents, you got to do one or the other. You're gonna have to do something. And so, but it was live. I mean, at the time, the older adult, choir, if you will, was a very successful, powerful choir. They had recorded, and this is the one that my mom was in, because she was, as an adult at the time. They had recorded an album. They used to go and travel, throughout the states, if not throughout the nation, and singing. The choir director. I mean, so being a part of the choir, being a younger person in the choir, it was like, oh, we part of this lineage. I mean, I didn't, we didn't think of ourselves as any less, quote unquote, talented. I mean, we wasn't doing the things that the adult choir was doing. But I mean, it was live. I mean, we would get invited to different churches to sing, and like I said, all of my friends at the time, were all associated directly, within the choir, and so I just appreciated. I appreciated, for what it was. I very much so thought it was a beautiful thing for us to be able to participate in. I associated, my spirituality, if you will, at the time with what we were singing and what we were expressing. I mean, obviously, we singing, different types of songs than the adults are singing, because we younger, so they, ours ain't as advanced as their songs were, but it was a special time, and I really appreciated that time, and thought we were doing a big thing and representing, our spirituality as I knew it at the time, to the best of our ability.
Islam. What I could add to that, Noble, and say that a lot of times I think, where if you're hearing, and I could just speak for our group, our body politic, if you will. So when we talk about the church, if, the church, and, 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 the church,
Mm-hmm.
from our experience, we're talking about it from a multifaceted point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think it gets projected that we're downing the church, so to speak.
Right.
And many of us have come through those many different houses of worship, and there's not, I can stand in front of you and tell you that I regretted going through those experiences, because I don't.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
when we voice our experience, I think it sometimes can be misinterpreted when we speaking from a Morris perspective about the church. So that kind of leads me to my next question. So as you're a child and you're with the choir, you're learning more about yourself, about your spirituality, and how you can display it as a child. Do you recall as you grew, where you kind of had a first maybe experience where your view or you're eager to learn maybe wasn't being satisfied, or you may have certain questions where you thought, and then your parents may have had a certain conversation with you, or you found no no issue or no challenges as a child in your younger years with the church, and it maybe come later.
I would say probably around my teenage years
Teenage years.
is when I think I started to pay attention more to the sermons and
Mm,
to the readings.
mm,
Like I said, when I was younger, we would, they go to Sunday school. All right, I just go to Sunday school. I mean, that was a
right,
thing. That was a thing that we did.
right,
I wasn't, thinking, very deeply into it. But I think
right.
as I started to move into my teenage years, it started to feel like, first of all, church service was long. I was like, man, we here for for a long time, and so, and then, you started consciously paying attention now, and recognizing either the scriptures, the passages, or the messages
Mm-hmm.
that were being given, every single Sunday. And then sometimes it was like we had to do 8 o'clock service, then we had to do
Wow.
10 o'clock service, and then sometimes there might be a late service that we had to go to. So it was just, it
Mm,
was a long day. So you started retaining more and more information
right.
that was being put out there. And at
Mm-hmm.
some point in time, I think, the wheels started to spin, and I started internally asking my questions. I mean, I grew
Right.
up during a time period where, I guess to a certain degree, young people were seen and not heard. So you wasn't gonna really ask certain questions, and I mean, I grew up, my father was in the military, I was a military brat, so we
Mm,
grew up in a quote unquote strict household. So
right.
while there were times I didn't feel like you could really ask questions about anything, in
Anything.
life.
Right.
So it was like, I'm gonna just keep it to myself. But your wheels are spinning, thinking
Right.
like, why this and why that? And okay,
Mm-hmm.
I've heard him say that before, but does
Mm-hmm.
that mean this? I didn't have, at least I didn't feel like at the time I
Right.
had an outlet or somewhere where I could go to kind of express those things. And so I had a lot of internal questions that didn't start to come out until somewhere around my teenage years, where I started to feel a bit more comfortable with starting to ask, well, why this and
And
why
why
that?
that? Right.
And what about this? Well, they said this,
Mm-hmm.
but I heard that, and I thought you said this before, and so I
Right.
think right around my teenage years is where I started um, to ask questions about what I was receiving. Up until then, I just, I mean,
Right. Right.
I was doing what we was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So like one thing that I always am really amazed at, and I'm looking at a lot of different organizations and associations, is the commitment that church folk have to the church,
Mhm. Absolutely.
right? And how I saw that coming up was, well, there's something that is bigger than us, bigger than me. And I'm seeing all these adults over here, committed to this thing. And, that was a really strong pull, me, and showing a level of commitment, looking at like what dedication looks like. Like I saw a lot of that, in the church experience. and how people, use leadership maybe in the wrong or not the best way. And so there was a lot of things going on in the environment of the church as a child for me that I saw coming up. So for you in the environment that you said, you were in the choir, your mother was also a part of the choir. I'm sure you had traveled around a lot. And what was your impact? Like, what was the people impact on you? Like, how did people treat you, or how did you experience people treating other people? Was this like a opening for you to the world, like in your experience of the church, because you frequented it a lot, somewhat like I believe I did as a young person. I started to learn about people in those environments. How was that experience for you?
Honestly, it was really positive. I went to a quote unquote the bigger church out here in the area. There was a lot of people who were very influential in a lot of areas, whether it be business, finance,
Yep.
nonprofit stuff I didn't really fully understand until I got
Yes.
older and started
Yes.
like doing things on my own and started
Right.
recognizing, oh, that's so and so that go to our church, or they did this to this, and that's so and so, and they did this to that, and they connected to, it was all love. We had a really big church. Like I said, it was really popular. It was everywhere we went, everything we associated with was all love. It was extremely positive. My family
That's
was
peace.
well respected because of how my mother and father, carried themselves. My mother
Right.
had a public service background, a law background. She wasn't a lawyer, but she worked in the court system. My dad, had the military background, but then he came out, he did insurance for a little bit, and then he got into telecommunications, and he
Right.
became, a handyman, whether it was by happenstance or he learned himself. I mean, we used to grow up and in the garage. He had all the little this old house, them books, lined
Right.
up. You know what I mean? And so I remember I'd be like, Daddy, can we watch the sports game? And he was like, No, we about to watch Bob Vila's This Old House. And I'm like, I don't like why, why are we watching? You know what I mean? And so, the background was different. And my mom and dad played sports. They were in the softball teams, and so I was around around that a lot. And so I was around a lot of positive, and influential, people. My baseball coach growing up went to my church. I mean, so just a lot of people who were influential in my life growing up. They were all a part of the church, and so that's all I knew is everybody was good people, and they cared about us. They treated us well, very kind, and so I had an extremely positive, experience, as far in that regard.
That's peace. So like your family wasn't the family that was going to church on Sunday, but partying all night on Saturday night. That wasn't y'all. That was so. This was a lifestyle, that I'm hearing that was a part of your childhood, like your early upbringing, like as far as the church goes. It was more of a community type of lifestyle, and
100%.
that's key because you saw the people that you fellowship with in church. You saw them out in the community.
Yep.
And they were doing things. They were workers. They were professionals. They had things going on for themselves and their families. So that was an awesome example of a collective body of people, like what we say it takes a village, right?
Yes.
So that was your village, and that was what Allah allowed you to be surrounded with and comforted with. So we give honor, we give praise to that. That's dope. That's dope, Noble. So in that backdrop, so as you became a teenager, right, and you start coming out in the world and start being more independent, and your neighborhood and everything like that, how does life started to change for you? Like when you started getting up in age and hitting the street and coming out a little bit of that cocoon, if you will.
I mean, I started, pushing the envelope. Growing up kind of at the church, we had like right down the street, which at the time it's, not even a quarter of a mile, right? There was an Albertsons, which is an older store. I don't know if it was on the East Coast or whatever. I live here on the West Coast. So we had an Albertsons, was right down the street.
Okay.
And so the goal was, to sneak out of church, get to the Albertsons so you can buy some candy and get back before any of the adults saw you.
Saw
Like
you,
that
right,
became
right.
the thing. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like, so it was like, and we sat in what's called the overflow, which wasn't in the main sanctuary, it was kind of to the side,
Right.
of where the choir and everybody was. And so the goal was like, let me sneak out and try to get to the store and get back before anybody caught you. But again, you remember this is back in the time where if anybody catch you, you can get in trouble like by anybody.
Yes.
Like it wasn't
Yes.
like, well, I'm gonna have to tell your mom and dad. Like they can get, you can get in
Right.
trouble. So that was my kind of, because my parents were very, like I said, we were strict, like, so that was like danger to me to be able to try to sneak out of church, get to Albertsons, buy some candy and get back, before anything happened. And so, that I think kind of spurred me to try to find my own voice in life and trying to figure out, what life was like, in other areas. I was very much so into sports.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was, my parents' way of keeping me out of trouble. I kind of feel like to a certain degree they was like, well, look, I'm gonna keep you in sports so that way you don't do nothing. As they say, the idle mind is is the devil's workshop. So
Right.
like, I was, football, basketball, baseball, soccer. I ran, and ran track. I was on the swim team. Like,
Wow, you was busy.
I
You was busy.
I
You
did
ain't
it
had time
all.
to do nothing else.
Right. You know what I mean? So that was, my life, to
Mhm.
a certain degree was I was always, doing something. And so that became where I, learned a lot and found my voice when it comes to, inner personal skills,
Right.
conflict resolution,
Right.
dealing with things. But I was fairly successful. Like
Yeah.
I was good in sports. Like, you know what I mean? So I
Mm.
always making all-star teams and, you know what I mean? So, life was good, for me in a lot of sense, but it was the place where I started to kind of, find myself. But I was a quiet cat. Like, I mean,
Mm.
it's way different than who I am right now. I didn't say nothing. I was
Right.
competitive. I had a fire,
Right.
but I didn't really talk. I just went out there and, you know what I mean? We're gonna run the 100. I'm not gonna say nothing. I'm just gonna, you know what I mean, run
Right.
past you.
Right.
We can go out here and play baseball. I'm switch hitting, I'm doing all kind of stuff. I'm just stealing bases and I'm, you know what I mean, just doing all kind of stuff, but I don't talk, and so that, I got the recognition for being like, man,
Mhm.
this dude is dope in sports, but he quiet. Like he don't,
Quiet.
you know what I mean? So everybody left me alone because, you know what I mean? Like I was just the sports dude. I was like, oh yeah,
So
he's good in sports.
right. So you saying you didn't speak much. So what was your crew like? What was your like those that we had our like whatever we call it, who we roll with at that time, and you thinking about okay, you could give us what was like the backdrop of the soundtrack at this time of that age in your teenager times, and you talking about now you're doing all of these sports, right? And there's a direct correlation to me with the age. Competition comes into play, which this is what the sports says, and then also you have the culture or the what we call like the street life, if you will, kicks in. Usually somewhere music is revolving around this time because that's like the soundtrack to our life and what we do. Where did you find like your voice? Because you said that you weren't speaking as much at a certain point in your life, and I want to know where does the transition begin at for you to find your voice and begin to start speaking more. And also I want you to give us that music on the back end.
Well, I mean, I grew up, I'm on the West Coast. So,
Right.
we over here, Snoop, you know what I
So
mean, Ice Cube, NWA, Pac, I mean, Digital
mhm.
Underground. I mean, like that's
You
that's
know,
that's what
all
it
the
was
classics,
over
all the
here. Yeah,
legends, all the
like
legends. Get
I
it?
feel like we lived in the golden age of music. Now my parents was old school. You know what I mean? So I grew up listening to that. That was their music. And that's always what was playing. But around my friends, and I wasn't really into music, but I was always around people with strong personalities. You know what I mean? I was always around people who had a voice. And so
Mm,
we over here, listening to the Above the Rim soundtrack,
mm,
listening to deep covers. I mean, like
mm,
that's the musical mix, at that time.
mm.
And like I said, I had people around me that were very outgoing and used their voice a lot. I wasn't. You know what I mean? You know,
Right.
I
So
was a little pretty boy that was just
mm,
good in sports and
right,
was just
right.
cool and quiet. So they was like,
So
oh,
you didn't really have to say too much. You
no,
didn't
I
have to say
didn't.
too much. Right.
No,
You
I
had to,
didn't. Because again, we gonna get on. If we gonna do something, you know, I'm just, if we gonna play hoop, okay, well, I'm about to just get it in real quick. If we gonna, you
right.
know, whatever we gonna do, if we gonna play football, okay, well, I'm gonna get it in. If we gonna, you know, whatever it is that we did, I was just really, really good in sports. So that became my voice. I never had to say anything. You know, my performance, you know, always, you know, spoke for me. And so I didn't really find my voice until really kind of you know, right around my really high school years, but really, really kind of getting out of high school. I mean, I started really getting into leadership things when I was in high school. Um, you know, my junior, senior year, and then as soon as I got out of high school, I hooked up with some guys. We started a clothing company,
Wow.
and that spurred my entrepreneurial spirit. I got around some other guys who were really, really heavy in the spoken word at the time. And so they would be on me like, man, you gotta stop being quiet, bro. Like you can't, you know what I mean? Like we can't be around you if you ain't gonna say nothing. Like you gotta, you know. And so through that experience, it got me to start coming out of my shell and
Wow.
started speaking and finding my voice. So
Well, that's peace. That's peace. You know, I think a lot of times too, as young, you know, Moorish men, they would say African American. Usually, if we don't kind of gravitate towards those external things early, right? We pick it up a little bit later, but there's different ways that we can speak, if you will. For you, it was sports, you know, and it was the way of you demonstrating your talents necessarily without speaking about it. It was like, okay, yeah, look at me, look at what I can do, right? And on another flip side, for someone else, it might be education, right? They may be really smart, right? Really scholastic, and that's how they kind of use their voice at certain times. Now, as you are now finding your voice and you're coming out and you're graduated from high school, and like you said, you're starting different entrepreneurial things. As you become, you know, more aware of certain things, do you recall when did you started digging deeper into yourself and when you started to kind of have certain questions about life and how it played out? Do you recall like a early memory of when you started to begin to think like that?
You know, like I said, it was around kind of that middle school, high school, you know, really kind of around that time. You know, I remember, you know, things like African Bambaataa and you know, the, you know, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. You know, I mean, I remember going through that, just, you know, the hearing that stage. But I was always, like I said, I grew up in a house that education was important. I told you, my parents was like, if you ain't reading, you know, and you can't explain to me stuff, then
Right.
I don't even want to hear what you have to say. So I just read a lot of books. Like
Okay.
that was my thing. I was a quiet guy, so I wouldn't, you know. So I had a lot of stuff to say. I just never spoke, you know. And so it wasn't until I got into to entrepreneurship, and which turned into leadership, to where I actually started like speaking and actually started expressing myself and expressing my views on things. Where people was like, "Oh, I didn't even know you. I didn't know you thought like that. Like
But
you ain't
how
even
that
said
make you
nothing."
feel? Like, well, how that make you feel? Like, wait, people was really responding to what you were saying. So, how did that make you feel?
I mean, it was positive because again, you know, I didn't know how people were gonna make me feel. I
Right.
always felt like life was very judgmental. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
you know, especially in the melanated community, that we were very judgmental about everything. So there was
Yes.
a part of me who didn't really want to say much because I was like, I
Yes.
didn't really want to be judged, you know. And as I started, you know, digging deep into history and starting reading and started coming across, you know, different types of literature and different types of information, and in some ways maybe challenging things that I had heard.
Yeah.
I didn't want to express that because I was like, well, shoot, ain't nobody else thinking like this. Like,
Right.
I don't know who I can have this conversation with, because everybody
Right.
was, you know, we black and we this and we that, you know. And
Right.
again, I wasn't knocking nobody. I didn't feel exactly I could talk to somebody about the things that was going on in my mind. And so I would really say poetry, like doing spoken word. That really was probably the biggest outlet that I had, because when I finally started writing things, that was my expression. Right. And when people would hear me say stuff in my spoken word, it was like, man, that was cold. I never thought you thought like that. You know, I didn't even know you know, like, how long you been thinking like that? I was because I was around very conscious people, you know, that were really I guess progressive to a certain degree. And so I didn't want to do the classical, ooh, and I love you so very much. And, when I see her body, like, that wasn't my style. I just wanted to speak and get my words out. And so, and I wanted to highlight the things that I had read. I wanted to highlight, certain things, I think my first poem I wrote was called, Am I? And so, and it was an ode to, like, am I all the things that our community says that quote unquote a Black man is supposed to be? Am I that? That's kind of what what it was about. And so that was my space to kind of, I guess, if you will, challenge the stereotypes, in my own way, but in a safe space where it wasn't a back and forth in a conversation with somebody, because I'm just doing a poem. So you know what I mean? You just respect the art.
It's funny you hit on that topic, man, because I recently heard, I think it was Burna Boy, actually. He was giving an interview and he was talking about, when you talk about the safe space, and you were talking about a certain type of I want to say culture, right? Like, that you were, given the room to voice your or articulate yourself, in which was the spoken word in that type of space. But what Burna Boy was saying was, like, he said, and I don't even know, they probably, it's clickbait, so they probably like dressed up the article title, but he said Burna Boy says the Black man of America doesn't have a culture, right? And I said, well, damn, I can see that. I can see it, and I know, like, that's controversial to say. You know what I mean? And we know why. But it's like, to what you said, wait a minute. I had to find my space to express myself, and the spoken word was that avenue for you, right? But it was something that necessarily was introduced to you, in a sense. So it wasn't like what you can say, grassroots type of thing that you had always, right? And I think when you speak to culture, it's something that's being cultivated. And we know historically, we brought all this. But when we're talking about in the modern day, I think a lot of times when you hear a lot of hip hop musicians say, I do it for the culture, right? And I step back from that and I say, well, like, let me think about what they really mean. Because I'm from the East Coast, right? I'm from Jersey, so I'm from New York. I'm right outside. Jersey City. We got hip hop pioneers here. Going back in the 70s. You know what I mean? Like, straightly, we know it started in the Bronx, but we got hip hop pioneers in Jersey, Chilltown, JC. So when I speak from that level, I can say, okay, you're talking about a hip hop culture. We talking about b-boys. We talking about breakdance. We talking about DJing. We talking about graffiti. We talking about that. That Blast Master talk about, knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everyone. We talking about that. I can get with you. But we talking about what we see going on right now. We got to have a discussion. You know what I mean? Because I believe it's more destructive than constructive. But that's just me.
No. So the people I'm thinking about. So go back to, like, the the books I'm reading. That's leading to me. I'm reading Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization. I'm reading, They Came Before Columbus by Cheikh Diop. I'm reading Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Thomas Browder. Like, these is the books that I'm reading,
right? That's
coming out of me when I'm speaking.
Spoken words. Yeah, right. You got to make a deposit first, right? Come on.
Right. So like, I'm already speaking about stuff that I don't think, the average person is reading, respectfully. And I'm not knocking nobody. I'm not, I'm just saying, I don't think there's a lot of you know what I mean, especially, you know, melanated people, I don't think that they read in these books. And so these are the things that I'm downloading into me. And so when I finally start writing, like, this is the stuff that's coming out. So not only was it like I ain't never heard this man talk really,
right,
but now he's speaking on just topics that it ain't an everyday topic, you know, for us to be, you know, discussing, you know, in the melanated community. And so it was really a coming out, you know, party, so to speak, you know, for me, because you know, I was what I was reading was resonating in my spirit so strongly,
right,
that I definitely wanted to say something. I was an introspective person by nature, because I just was always quiet and just reserved and kind of processing.
right.
And so now here I am, I'm coming out and I'm just hitting on these topics, you know, in ways where it's like, man, who is you, sport? Like, where
No, but that's why
been?
performing arts, man, is so important in our communities, man. That's a great example of why performing arts are so important.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, we don't know what avenues and what outlets where people feel most comfortable. And a lot of time for us is in the arts. You know, you kind of get to be free, not, you know, told what to say or do. You kind of expressing your own way you see things. So that's beautiful, man. That was a beautiful navigation right there through that period. So when you, like you said, when you found your voice and you were able to speak those things based on what you were already putting inside yourself by reading, by studying, you know, by having that acquisitive mind, you know, we're gonna park there. We're gonna park there because we know we got to come back with part 2 on this, because we got to get into your transition into when you started to notice Sheik Kyrie, and how that, you know, kind of affected your life and your trajectory and where you are today. So
that was a journey. That was a journey, kind of, like, to that point, because, you know, I went through a whole, like I say, I told you what I was reading, and so that led to different types of experiences, which eventually led me, you know, to Sheik. And so absolutely, I appreciate it.
It's long. No, I appreciate your time, man. Noble LaMark, Barclay Bay, in the building on Journey to a Knowledge of Self. You know, giving us an introduction of his journey and to himself at this point in time, and he's going to unfold more as we, you know, go forward by Allah's grace. So we want to give you love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, Noble, for joining us on this episode, and there's more to come. Islam.
Islam.
Peace and love, Noble.
Peace and love.
Peace.